And John Bussey, who's the assistant managing editor and executive business editor at the Wall Street Journal. I guess this has been building, but who is to think that we could end up in a position where there are tens of thousands of people on a mountain where they think Noah's Ark was back in the day, thinking they'll be safe there. They have no food and no water. A lady from the mountain has gone down to the government and made a plea in the Kurdish north. Listen to this.
We call on anyone that can help us because our families are dying. We do not know their fate. Old people and children are without food and they are scared to death, and the Islamic State is slaughtering them.
And we heard there was another soundbite from a woman who was in a government come together where they were like, we got to put aside our religious differences at the moment and try to save the 40,000 people could be dead in days, and if they collapse that dam, millions.
Yeah. Julian Barnes, our Pentagon reporter, is reporting that the airdrops of humanitarian aid could start as early as tonight, Thursday, in Iraq, to begin to address that. The question is, what would the limited, and the administration says limited, airstrikes be targeted at? Would it be to clear a path for the humanitarian aid? Would it be at some other, part of the battlefield at this point, which is enormous across most of Iraq?
One of the problems is the Iraqi military melted away, and when it did, it left the weapons that we left them behind. The ISIS militants now have that, and the concern must be that if we get involved militarily and ISIS is able to do something to us militarily, we have a new game.
Yeah, that's right. They are enormously empowered. They have the vehicles, they have the weapons, they have the cash that has been left behind.
Hundreds of millions of dollars.
As a result, that's going to empower them for quite some time. I think one of the things to watch is what our reporter Noor Malas has reported on, which is that, separate from discussion of airstrikes, there's conversations going on between some of the provincial governors who are Sunnis, who say, look, we here, civilians and the tribes, are once again interested in U.S. assistance in fighting the militant Sunnis, just as they did during the Anbar awakening, as you remember, 2008, 2009. The question is whether or not the U.S. is going to be able to provide enough assistance to those governors. They've reached out to Secretary Kerry already. Whether or not the U.S. is inclined to provide that assistance, whether they think it would be effective, and whether or not the tribes would be willing to associate themselves with a civilian, with a government-backed military force, even if Maliki is still in power. And they all argue that he's got to go before anything's going to happen on the ground.
Though this is in a Kurdish region, again, this is Sunni versus Shia, which has dividing lines that separate all parts of this region, and it again puts us on one side of a much broader fight. That's not where we want to be.
And a very complicated one. The Yazidis are a mixed religion of kind of pre-Islamic faith. There's a bit of Islam in it, there's a bit of Christianity in there. It's a declining faith, but it's found in this part of Iraq, it's found in Armenia, it's found in Syria. And it's a minority, just as Christians are a minority, and that's what the Islamic State is very keen on wiping out. They want a caliphate. They do not want religious minorities in their minds in the way.
Because anyone who is a religious minority has gone against the wishes of Allah, and anyone who has must be killed. That's their rationale.
Yeah, I think that's correct. And I think for the United States, watching what now happens in these provinces, where some of the governors are stepping up and saying the current government in Baghdad is unable to address this problem, we are willing to organize forces here, as we did in 2008 and 2009, to fight the militant part of the Sunni sect. Watch that process unfold.
Ed Henry, it was a 2007 statement from the Pentagon on this dam that gives us clarity on what would happen if they knocked it down. And I'm sure one of the things that's being calculated now is if the United States gets involved and if ISIS starts to feel like it's about to be overrun, to what lengths would ISIS go? Would ISIS knock that dam down and kill millions of people?
Look, it seems like the door is open for them to do anything, as Jahan is laying out. This is a ruthless group of people. Look, and you can take that from the White House, not from me. I mean, Josh Earnest started his briefing out and answering all this, saying that ISIS is cold and calculating. They're killing people. This is outrageous. It has to stop. So what's fascinating to watch this play out, how quickly it's going and how tragic it is that it's the White House itself making the case for why ISIS needs to be stopped. But given the searing experience experience of the war in Iraq, this president seems to be very cautious in terms of are we going to get deeply involved in Iraq again? Josh Earnest, after laying out the case for action, went on to say there's no U.S. military solution to this. The Iraqis have to work this out. They have to form a new government. Well, Shep, you know better than anyone, it might take the Iraqis months or even years to work out a new government. In the meantime, you've got 40,000 people on a mountain that might be slaughtered. That's cold comfort for them. And I'm not saying the U.S. has a magic bullet here, but if we're going to wait for the Iraqi government to be formed and be fair to everybody, that could take years.
This was, without question, the safest, most secure region, the most peaceful region. The Kurds have the Peshmerga. The Peshmerga were very well armed and very well organized, and they had skin in the game, and they won all their fights.
And they retreated.
Until ISIS had the weapons which came from America. And you wonder if that is not going to come back to bite us as well.
Yeah, that's right. They retreated, and that's exposed this region to ISIS moving in. But mind you, it's not just the White House that's cautious about putting boots on the ground.
Sure.
And that was very explicitly stated in the press conference today. No boots on the ground. It's the American public that is not in favor of doing that. They look back on the last 10, 12 years of war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and they say, what has been accomplished? They're concerned that more U.S. sacrifice in that region will be equally unproductive.
Catastrophe in Iraq, the potential that Putin is going to invade Ukraine, and Hamas saying there's no deal yet, we may restart this war. 3 different fronts. And what is America to do?